Between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis, and the gleaming cities, and the years of the rise of the sons of Ares, there was an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like blue mantles beneath the stars. Welcome to Antiquity X, where we ask strange questions about our strange past. I'm your host, Dr. Judd Burton. As always, if you like the content, click a like, subscribe, and share. Den dit Orden reiten schnell, goes the line from Berger's rather macabre poem Lenora, for the dead travel fast. And tonight the discussion will be on the identities of these supposed dead spirits. And at the end of the year, as we get to the darker half of the year, there have historically been festivals and times and rituals that have been designed to communicate with the dead. Halloween, Pomona, Samhain, Dia de los Muertos, and the like. But who are the dead? These dead that travel fast. Are they ghosts that people, the folklore of the world? Are they our past along loved ones, ancestors? Are they the revered kings of antiquity, gods, or any number of other varieties of species of supernatural beings? We know that, again, in the history and culture of the world, there have been specialists, shamans, mediums, necromancers, etc., who specialize in the communication with the dead, and even attempts to modernize these practices in recent centuries, as evinced by movements such as Spiritism and Spiritualism that came out of the 19th century, as illustrated here by a seance taking place in the early 20th century. So again, who are the dead, these dead spirits? There is an answer to this if one is prepared to endure it. And I would posit that the answer is not immediately forthcoming. These spirits are the dead, but they aren't the dead as we might imagine them on the surface, as coming from the pages of a ghost story. The dead do, in fact, travel fast, but they inhabit the underworlds, the netherworlds of a myriad of traditions from antiquity to the present, as evinced by this scene from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the famous courtroom scene, including deities such as Osiris and Isis and Anubis. But yes, there is an answer, and there are ancient sources that point us to those answers with fairly compelling evidence. And the answer to this riddle comes to us from the documents, the histories, the traditions, and the testimonies in this study, anyway, from the ancient Near East. Testimonies from books like the Bible, Mesopotamian documents like the Enuma Elish, and collections of documents from the ancient Phoenicians, such as the Ugaritic text, the Rosh Hashanah text. And the answer to this puzzle, as I noted a moment ago, is the Rephaim. The Rephaim may be a familiar word to you if you are a student of the Bible, and we'll delve a little more deeply into that in the forthcoming segment. But you'll recognize the Rephaim as a tribe of giants in the ancient Levant and ancient Near East, associated with the Hebrew concepts of the underworld. The Rephaim, just in terms of their ethnology, were one of a number of tribes in the ancient Levant, such as the Anakim. The homeland, as it were, of the Rephaim, interestingly enough, would include places like the Bashan area in the ancient Golan, where this monument, Gilgal Rephaim, bears the name of the Rephaim, is to be found. Although they were strewn throughout many parts of the Levant, they're certainly associated with the area around the base of Mount Hermon. And these are creatures, of course, that had angelic and human pedigree, just like their Nephilim forebears. And what was the fate of these creatures? Well, we turn again to sources like Enoch that tell us very clearly, giving commentary on the Genesis account, that these creatures, their forebears, the Nephilim, died in the flood, and their spirits became the oppressing spirits of the Old Testament, in that case the Ob, and then the unclean spirit of the New Testament. The Rephaim occur in passages such as Genesis 14 and 15, the famed War of Five Armies, or War of Five Kings, excuse me, Deuteronomy 2 and 3, and of course Joshua in the accounts of the conquest of Canaan. And as the name is usually translated as dead ones or shades or wraiths, something of that nature, you begin to see the connective tissue between the concept of the Rephaim and their association with the dead, which will become clearer as we talk. Interestingly enough, they are associated with necromancy in the Old Testament, and the prohibition against that is directly tied to it, because they knew that these things could masquerade as dead spirits. And there were, again, a host of semi-professional religious officials who could practice this sort of mediumship to contact these wraiths. But that prohibition was very specific because of the association with the spirits in Sheol, these Rephaim, the dead ones, as they were called. And but of course there are other sources and personality. Well, there are personalities like Og that you'd be familiar with in the case of the pedigree of the Rephaim. Now, as to other sources, there are Mesopotamian sources, and I bring this plate up to show you one word, Rabu, in the lower right-hand corner. You can see the character for it. It means prince or king or ruler, and there's probably an association with the Mesopotamian underworld, the netherworld, the Apsu, or the abyss. There's some sort of phonetic connection with these words, and the relation to the Apsu becomes very clear when you consider that you had these great sort of ancient god kings like the Apkallu and the Anunnaki, who were associated with this netherworld, and even names like Hammurabi and Amraphel preserve words like Ravu. Now here is a plate from the Ugaritic funerary text. Now, Ugarit, of course, was a coastal city on the coast of the Levant, a Phoenician city, and a number of caches of documents, including the Rosh Shamra, give testimony about this. And the word Rap also occurs in Ugaritic sources. And even in this particular example, the Rephaim are intoned by name and invoked. In fact, one line reads, "You are summoned, O Rephaim of the earth." Consequently, there are prominent Rephaim referenced in the same cache of documents, including Og. And so, in the Ugaritic context, these things are clearly, Rop is translated as the long dead, but they're clearly the ancient kings, long dead kings that these people revere now as their gods. And there are all kinds of propitiation and rituals designed to communicate with them and call their favor. So, is it becoming clearer to you that there is a specific identity to these quote-unquote dead that are often communicated with, by mediums and the like? Yes, they are the dead, but they are the spirits of these dead god kings, the Rephaim, who masquerade as people's loved ones who have departed. If you're interested in this topic and studying this connection, you can certainly reference my books like Interview with a Giant. I would also highly recommend books like Veneration by Derek and Sharon Gilbert. And if you really want to take a scholastic deep dive into these connections, then I highly suggest looking into the research of the Estonian Assyriologist Amar Anus, who's quite talented, quite adept at looking at a lot of this material. Well, that's all for this episode of Antiquity X. Thank you for joining me and looking at the identities of the dead who travel fast.